So hello there and welcome to a brand new episode of the DNF1 F1 Podcast, the show where we take all of the latest news, gossip and events in the world of Formula 1 and we relay that back to you for your listening or viewing pleasure, depending of course on which platform you choose to follow us on. And after so much anticipation from the F1 summer break left us for so long without an F1 race, we finally come to Spa-Francorchamps, hoping for some exhilarating action and seeing our favourite teams and drivers give us one hell of a race. And in the end, it was an absolute washout. Of course, the provisional result, as I understand, is that Max Verstappen does get the win based on his qualifying performance. And of course, an incredible podium as well for George Russell and another podium for Lewis Hamilton. As I said, provisional result because there's a few little things I think we do need to talk about that may come to light in the next day or so after everyone has tried to absorb what the hell happened today. And obviously joining me on this episode to help go through some of that and a few other things as well and try to make somewhat of a podcast out of this because there isn't too much action to talk about. But nonetheless, my guest today is Steven Featley from StevenFeatleyTV. Steven, thanks for joining us on the podcast once again. Welcome back. And how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm doing well, mate. I'm pretty... did a 4-hour watch along of doing quizzes, looking back at clips from previous times on my streams, having also famous guests on as well. I don't know if you mentioned about Lee Gunner and that, but yeah, having them on at times. And apart from that, and after that, the race. It was just trying to make the time go while the race was deciding not to be run. So.
Well, I didn't know Lee Gunner was much of a Formula One fan, but although to be fair...
No, we were just showing old
I see. Right.
Right.
Right. No, that's fair. I mean, given the state of Arsenal Football Club at the moment, as you and I will both know, that there's not a lot to be cheerful about at the moment. So Formula One is kind of a nice escape for us. But an absolutely crazy race. I don't think either of us could have predicted what was about to unfold. I don't think any of us have seen anything quite like it. I know we've had races in the past affected by rain, even to the degree where the races had to have been stopped early and half points have been awarded, particularly Malaysia.
Last time was Malaysia, 2009.
That's right. And, that was the last one on memory. We saw Jenson Button winning half points back then. And of course, we saw something on even more drastic measures today. And I mean, how can we sum up what we've seen today? Because I wouldn't want to say it's a bit of a procession, but ultimately, the cliche of, you don't score points on a Saturday, they're awarded on the Sunday, has gone completely out of the window after what we saw today.
Well, yeah, I mean, it raises a question. Did they actually deserve the points that they get? Because they've done 2 laps under a safety car, so they can award points. Some people could say, okay, you got the Dutch Grand Prix in a week, we can do it on a Monday and you'll still be there by the Dutch Grand Prix on a Thursday. So there's other sort of questions you could follow up about it, but the part of it for me is like, I get that obviously Max Verstappen wins and he cuts Hamilton's down championship by 5 points. But what's he done in the race to deserve to get those points? He hasn't done anything. The same with Hamilton, and he hasn't done anything to deserve the points he gets. I mean, obviously George Russell deserves the podium by getting it on second place with a Williams. So, but I get like you can award him with a win, but giving them points as a reward, I don't see where they've earned the right to get that. If so, why don't you give half points during a qualifying session and then give the other half during a race?
Well, this is the argument I saw a lot of people on social media sort of express their discontent for what had happened. I mean, Lewis Hamilton pointed out in his post-race press conference just before the podium that, you can't blame anyone for the weather. And, it was an impossible situation that everyone found themselves in. We obviously wanted a race to go ahead. Everyone was ready to go. Perhaps there may have been 1 or 2 rather minute windows where they could have had some racing for a small amount of time. But in the end, safety is paramount. And of course, we're going to get into something related to safety in Formula One after what we saw this weekend anyway. But it as you said, it did raise a lot of concerns owing to the situation in the championship, obviously how that's been affected. Should drivers be awarded points for doing what was effectively a 2-lap race behind the safety car, where the only way drivers were going to drop points or fall out of position as if they'd made a mistake and gone off the road, by which Sergio Perez had actually done before the race even started. And that brought up another debate. There were so many different things that came up today that confused a lot of the F1 fans, and I think you could argue to a degree that the stewards almost made the race up as they were going along.
Yeah, I think there's like a load of parts, because this happens very rarely. There's no rules to sort of say that, like, oh, Perez is stuck in a wall. Because usually if you think Perez is stuck in a wall on the way to the grid, that's it, done. You don't get a race start. I was actually quite surprised, to be fair, when Max Verstappen did it in Hungary last year. They were very quick to get that car out of it, but then he was been able to get it out of the barrier, so that's probably one advantage. But that's another story. But I feel with what they were trying to, what obviously presented themselves is that there's a lot of loopholes into parts of the rule book that don't usually be needed because this hardly happens. So with that, with like certain situations like we had with today, no one's got rules for that because it hardly happens. So they might need to go back and look back through this race and say, okay, it's like when we had a 6-hour race with Canada in 2011 and it took so long to get that race restarted, and they decided that's it, you get a 4-hour window. And this is why now after a 4-hour window, we couldn't do any more racing. So it's throwing up different scenarios that they haven't faced before, and they haven't got no rules to cover it.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. And I think that kind of leads me to my first major question on this one, Stephen, is do you feel that because they proceeded with what was effectively a couple of laps behind the safety car, which translated to being a formation lap, and then officially the first lap of the race, did the stewards put themselves into a corner where by doing that and not delaying the start of the race altogether because of the weather, which we all anticipated they would do, they put themselves in a position where they prevented themselves from having the opportunity to perhaps reschedule this race tomorrow and actually try and run a race, because the race clock was 3 hours long and it started running effectively from the point where they completed that first lap, which, as I understand, means that they have to finish the race within the 3 hours, of course.
Well, yeah, I mean, from what I heard was that the race clock was stopped after the first initial laps from the formation lap, because usually they would pull off and that was it. The race starts there. But from what I heard when it came to the pit lane, that the race clock was stopped. But because like we've gone 3 hours into the race, there was only an hour. They only had an hour's worth of track time before the circuit had to be closed, because it was getting 7 p.m. and it was getting dark, as well as like the mist and the rain hanging in the air. It looked pretty much like it was getting dark already. So it was, I think it was more the track of how much track time they were allowed at Spa anymore, rather than actually the clock running down. That's from what I got. But yeah, I mean, when they restarted it for 2 laps, well, what was the point? You might as well just, for me, it was like, well, ask the teams and drivers if you can all do the race tomorrow, make it for the Dutch Grand Prix in a week's time. If they can do that, do it tomorrow. It's just, I think a lot of fans would have been happy if it just said, right, this ain't going to happen. Right, the rain keeps coming. We're not going to do this. And I think they could have decided probably a lot earlier than they did, and say, we'll try this tomorrow or something. Because I think probably the conditions were looking a little bit better tomorrow. So, yeah, I just think F1's been caught out here, and in the end, they've done the best decision for safety, but in terms of the fans, it's not also the best decision because they didn't get the fans the race that they could have had if they probably decided to do it on another day.
Yeah. I mean, Spa-Francorchamps historically is a track that on the best of days, weather-wise, it's always a tough challenge. When it rains, especially in the manner that it did, it's battered impossible when it becomes a severe safety risk. I suppose that brings me nicely around to the next question, really, because you've mentioned, obviously, about the possibility of having the race on the Monday. And of course, a few team bosses obviously gave their perspective, all of which, from what I understood during the Sky F1 broadcast, I think Gunther Steiner kind of mentioned this as well, that it would be nigh on impossible, or it'd be a massive inconvenience for them to have the race on Monday and then wrap everything else up and then go to Zandvoort, albeit, the most local racetrack of its kind for F1 that you could possibly want to go to after a race at Belgium. But it still created a lot of logistical challenges, which wouldn't guarantee that they'd be running at the race next weekend without any major concerns, which of course would be a lot worse. So does this mean that F1 are starting to realise, perhaps for the first time, that this desire, this need to get as many races into the season as possible, and for future seasons, they may be reaching a stumbling block now where perhaps they need to sit down and think, actually, maybe 22 or 23 races, or even 25 races that was mooted at one point that they wanted to achieve, is too much. Maybe we need to try and consider cutting it back a little bit to not necessarily just, give our teams and drivers more opportunities to perhaps have a race on Monday if we ever have something like this again, but also to give them that necessary rest and resuscitation, and also allow the teams to deal with any issues logistically that may arise in the future, especially in a COVID world that we're living in the moment, where more problems for logistics have been surfacing.
Well, this is what I had the problem originally. Originally, when they came out with it, they said we want to achieve 25 races. I looked at it and I'm like, well, hang on. You want 25 races and you want it to be, as they put it, like NASCAR in a sense, where you have all these races. The problem, the thing with NASCAR is it's in one continent, it's in one country. Formula One is a global sport. It's the only one of, it's pretty much the most pinnacle of its kind that goes to like every single country from every single continent, if possible. So if that's the case then, and they're going for so many continents and so many countries, how is it possible you're going to be asking them to be able to do a race here, like say Singapore 1 week, and then go to Japan the next week, and then from maybe Japan and then fly in 2 weeks? That's still a challenge in itself, from Japan all the way to America. So it's they could back themselves into a corner where they're so pressured to get races like this that, again, they might have to say, like, we're going to have to like cancel the race because we can't get it done. So whether, to be fair though to them, is that when I've always looked at calendar at Spa, the next race that follows Spa after a 3-week break has always been a week after, because they've had a 3-week break. So I would have still probably think, if we had a 20 race calendar, we would probably be still doing a race next week anyway. So, but it does beg the question that they are so pressured to get so many races in, and I get why, because it makes more revenue for the teams. It makes more awareness, sponsorship, increases the brand and everything like that. But in the end, like, it's getting to a point that they're just going to say, well, I'm sorry, we can have, say, a certain number of races that shouldn't be removed from the calendar. We know that. But there's a certain number of races where you say, all right, you can have it 1 year, but then this country gets to have it another year, and then so forth, if you want so many countries to have their own Grand Prix.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, I, like you and most F1 fans, we want to see our favourite F1 teams and drivers racing.
Oh, we want to see it all the time. We want to see it all the time. We don't ever want to break. But unfortunately, these things got to break, and they've got to have a break to redesign a new car for a new year and everything. So
absolutely, yeah, of course. I mean, you and I, in a way, are used to growing up in an F1 world where we were used to seeing 16, 17 races a season, kind of similar to what we got last year, although it was spread out evenly, usually on a fortnightly basis. You very rarely get 2 races in 2 weeks, especially triple headers. You never saw triple headers in Formula One back then.
No, I mean, you never. some of the people that come on are watching them now, and there's one that is literally she's only just starting out watching F1, and like I'll tell you, it's like you don't get these many races back then, not at all. Which is why when you see like Hamilton break 92 race wins, or someone breaks over 300 Grand Prix starts, it's like, well, it's a bit flawed because they get so many races now, where there's other racers back in the past didn't get that many races. But at one time, I mean, don't forget the first championship had about, I think it was like 8 races in it.
Probably not even that much, yeah.
Yeah, so it is rapidly growing, and fair play, and that's why it's the pinnacle of its sport. But it gets to a point you just need to, the teams need to sort of time out at times and give them a chance to recuperate. There was some, I remember one time is that even 2010, 2011, where you had a week break, you had Australia, then a week in Malaysia, and then there was a 3-week break, and then you had China and Bahrain within a week. So they had another 3-week break, or they'd have 3 races, like 2 weeks, and then a 3-week break before starting the European season. But now you don't even get that now.
Yeah, no, it's literally all bunched together. And of course, as I said, whilst we enjoy watching, I mean, look, right, today was a bit disappointing because we didn't get a race. And, you know, the positive of the F1 calendar is that we've got a race to look forward to next weekend. It's not like we have long to wait. You know, we'll wake up tomorrow morning and go, oh, it's race week once again, and all the, you know, the hype and build up and everything else. And of course, our preview podcast will obviously be working on that in the week. That will, you know, that will follow suit. But, you know, these men and women are human beings. And of course, you know, the equipment is not unlimited anymore. Of course, we're in a budget cap era as well, which makes things very, very difficult for a turnaround. And it does raise the question that whilst we want to try and get this F1 World Championship, or at least Liberty Media want this F1 World Championship to be out there as many venues as it possibly can, there has to be a limit on, you know, feasibility wise, there has to be a limit on how many we can realistically do. And I think an ideal number for me would be around 20. I like round numbers. I think 21's fine, but I think 20 is a good round number for me. And you can cover a good portion of the world that's heavily invested in Formula One to appease the traditionalist fans or the nostalgic fans that like the European classic races that we see that so few and far between are on the calendar these days because of newer circuits arising. But then, of course, making sure that it opens itself up to newer venues like we're seeing in Jeddah. We're going to possibly be seeing a race in Qatar and maybe one in South Africa in the next few years. You know, venues like that you wouldn't have imagined Formula One going back to in the modern era. And, you know, we're going to be seeing races there. So there's definitely a niche there. But I think what we saw today, and obviously the challenge is logistically, moving from Belgium to Holland, which is probably one of the easy transitions that I mentioned already, it does create quite a lot of problems for these teams who, you know, anyone that's watching,
I think the main problem, I think the main thing is that, and what I'm stemming from is Spa's a classic race. And every year, everyone wants to go to Spa. Remember how we missed Monaco? As much as it's a procession, we missed Monaco last season. Big time. Everyone missed it. It's the spectacle of it. Right? And it's the same as Spa. Like, if you miss a Grand Prix like Spa, like, because of wet weather, you miss it. And remember times on the calendar when they were trying to adjust the bus stop chicane all the time, that they'd have times where it was off the calendar and you're like, where is it? You got to have Spa. So some of these races, like your Monzas, like your Spas, like your Monacos, and these classic tracks that we all know and love, right? Yes, they're a dying breed, but you miss them desperately when they're not on the calendar. So for me, I think everyone's just at the minute, they're just disappointed they didn't get, they're disappointed they didn't get to see a race at Spa, and we all are, because we love Spa, we love the challenge of it, we love the beauty of it, we love the danger of it as well, but that's what makes Spa. But I mean, like that only when you get to see like Alonso's helmet cam, where you like get to see what's great about Spa and like the challenge of it, but I think everyone's just disappointed to see. It would have been nice to see what Alonso was seeing out of that helmet during the formation lap, by the way.
Yeah. I did mention that on social media. I think that, they were showing off helmet cam this weekend, which, by the way, was absolutely fantastic. It really, really was. To get that kind of driver's eye perspective to a degree. Obviously, it's
The
not
roll cap doesn't quite do it, does it?
No.
In terms of a Rouge, when you're looking at it, it doesn't quite do it. When you see the helmet cam, it's like, you can't see nothing. What's going on?
Yeah, no, you're right. It really doesn't do it justice until you see it. And we would have loved to have seen a driver's eye perspective, at least, of what it would have been like today. I imagine probably just
it only probably lasts about 10 seconds. It would have been
possibly, just fog and water and everything else. The only driver you'd have had half a chance of getting something decent viewpoint-wise is Max Verstappen, who was at the very, very front, or perhaps Bert Mylander in the safety car at the front,
Mylander,
who probably led more laps today than anybody else. So, but
usually he's at the back of the grid, so he's probably had a result today.
Yeah, Mercedes winning again. They just can't help themselves.
Would it have been funny for the podium? They put him up on the podium as first place.
I did see someone actually do a mock-up of the podium image that they on the F1 Twitter page. Obviously not that one. Someone had taken it. Yeah. And I think, or it was the Instagram page, it might have been. And someone did a mock-up where they had obviously Bert Mylander winning, Alan Mandavera in the medical car coming second, and then whoever was driving that tractor at Pouon and Stavolo 1 and 2 come P3. That would have been an interesting podium. But look, obviously let's talk about the race itself, or at least what we can do. Obviously, there wasn't hardly any action at all. We literally got, I think, just in the last hour, they let the cars go out behind the safety car for 2 laps, which I felt was possibly going to happen because I think they did want points to be awarded in this race. They didn't want to void it or anything because of the situation they'd put themselves in. And it created a result which pretty much reflected qualifying, with, of course, the exception of Sergio Perez, who made a big mistake at Les Combs on the way to the grid and obviously crashing it into the wall. We'll talk about him momentarily. But obviously this does have ramifications for the championship now, of course, with Max Verstappen getting the win as a result of basically qualifying on pole position. The only way you could really award it to him, he's been given points which has allowed him to close the gap on Lewis Hamilton in the Formula 1 Drivers' World Championship. And of course, Stephen, obviously I know you're a big Lewis Hamilton fan, and we talked about this on your show the other day that Max has been very, very unfortunate the last couple of races before the summer break and probably should be leading this championship by quite some margin. Would you say today, if the result of course stands, and again we'll get into that in a moment, could you say that perhaps this is a little bit of payback for Max Verstappen, not at Hamilton's expense, but at least some form of fortune has come his way, even if it's in the form of half points, and allows him to close the deficit rather than overtake Lewis in the championship?
I think it's a little bit of one of those, like, I've got some confidence back for like doing a good job in qualifying, and in the weekend he's managed to get a bit of luck, and he'll get some confidence from having some luck. And you need a any championship hunt, you need some bit of luck go along the way, and Hamilton's had his very good share of it. I'm not going to deny that, but the only thing I don't like, and like I said, I mentioned about the points position before, but what I don't like is after the race, and this has happened the last few Grand Prix, the last 2 Grand Prix now, where Hamilton, every time he goes to a press conference in front of the fans, he's getting booed. Well, if these guys can't understand what racing's all about, right? And if you get 2 title contenders are not going to back down, and they're going to make contact, that's the end of it. And you can't understand that. Don't turn up and watch it, right? If you're going to sit there and he's driven his heart out and you're going to boo at someone, right? I mean, we've already seen the disgusting messages he's had following that accident, and I've been like trying to defend that being a Hamilton fan. It's like it hurts me as well as probably him, but it's just like wrong on so many levels. And I just feel that, like, look, Verstappen's moved on, they've moved on, it's happened, it's done, it's finished, it's sorted. Leave it and just leave it alone now.
So
Right.
yeah, I mean that's a fair point. I can understand. I mean, I can obviously understand it. It's horrible, some of the stuff that was said to Lewis Hamilton. Very, very wrong on that count. I suppose my question on the fan behaviour, if you like, is: do you feel that a lot of the fans? Let's assume that they're the Dutch Red Bull fans that obviously are in their droves at this event, and this isn't me implying that they're being racist. It's not. My question is do you think that they were booing Lewis Hamilton because of what happened at Silverstone, or do you think that they were booing Lewis Hamilton because he is Max's immediate rival, and this is this kind of vibe and fan atmosphere that the Max Verstappen Dutch fans, if you like, have been injecting into Formula One, not just recently, but whilst Max has been at the forefront of the sport at the moment? Because, and I don't want to, say that I don't want to deny some of the stuff that's going on, because that'd be very, very stupid to do. And it's certainly happening and it's wrong on all levels. But I don't want to portray the Max Verstappen fans that are booing Lewis because of the crash at Silverstone.
It's not, most of them, I just feel that it has been, they've only started since the accident.
Right.
So for me, it's only because of the accident. Now, right, for me, burn on levels is just not right. You just don't do it, right? So especially when they've put on a show for you guys, and like, I mean, it doesn't bother Hamilton. He's got a unique way of making him stronger from that. So, but like I said before, I'm not pointing anyone out as like whatever that was said on social media, like that could be anyone. That could be anyone who just doesn't like Lewis. So, and you get a fair people in this country that don't like Lewis. So it could be anyone all around the world. So it might not. It's got enough. It probably had nothing to do with like the Dutch fans myself. It'd just be like anyone who totally disagrees with the accident and who they think is to blame. And some of them still firmly believe that Hamilton's completely to blame in that. And there's even some people that I know that do their own YouTube stuff on F1, and they described the incident as him trying to kill Verstappen, for God's sake. I mean, it's just that so many things have just been blown completely out of proportion from it. And I think they just need to just accept that both drivers have now dealt with it and they've moved on from that. Yes, they are rivals, but they just deserve the same respect as anyone else. I mean, I didn't see after the sprint race with the British fans booing Verstappen at all. So I just feel that this just needs to be the same respect on both levels. And that could be, and like I said, it could be any one of those fans. It can't just be the Dutch fans. Like, it could be any one of them.
No, that's fine. I mean, I suppose the point I'm getting at is that I have heard fans, not just this season, but other seasons where they've booed certain drivers, Lewis Hamilton, Sebastian Vettel in the past. And obviously it's not necessarily just because of certain incidents or how they see certain things. It's sometimes they might not like that particular driver because they're a rival, or in Seb's case, when he was dominating the World Championship, he wasn't a very popular person back then. Nico Rosberg, of course, had his fair share, and even Michael Schumacher to a degree had some in the past as well. I mean, my point is that I think, yes, I completely agree that some of the Max Verstappen fans would have felt a bit angry about what happened at Silverstone. And of course, they may have gone to certain races and chosen to express their discontent by booing Lewis Hamilton, which I'm not really a fan of in Formula One. I don't think it's something that, whilst I've seen it in other sports and, it's just a part of the atmosphere, and in times, I feel like sometimes you can consider that to be a part of it in Formula One. I feel like sometimes when it comes to Formula One and when certain drivers are talking in press conferences, I think maybe we need Max Verstappen to just go out and when Lewis is having an interview on a podium and just say, look, guys, I know we're competing, I know we're rivals, and I know you're cheering for me, but do us a favor. You don't need to boo Lewis. If you're not a fan of his, that's fine, but just don't bring that negativity to it, because
to be fair, I think to be fair to on Max's side is they've tried when the media tried to stir it up again in Hungary. He completely shut them down and said, "We both moved on. It's done. It's finished. Leave it. Don't want to hear anything. Don't even like. I'm not going to exactly say what he said because there's bad language in it. But he's basically telling them to just shut up and stop talking about it because they don't want to listen to it anymore. So I think to be fair to Max, he's done his part in that. So it's up to them it's up to them, to be honest, if they continue or not. But it could just be anyone that just doesn't like Hamilton. So
yeah.
And there are some people that don't like Hamilton because he's dominated so long, right? And I get that. And people didn't like Schumacher because he dominated so long. And there's people didn't like Vettel because he didn't dominate so long. Now all of a sudden Vettel's a really nice guy. So they just probably get bored with the fact that they know Hamilton's leading the championship, and they probably realise that this is the stage of the season where he starts pulling away. So they were just put that it could be the fact that they're scared that Hamilton's going to win the championship again. So it could be a number of reasons, but it does seem to stem from that incident. But the drivers moved on about it, and the thing is that I know Hamilton doesn't even take that on board, and if he does, he turns it into a positive and proves them all wrong, and beats them by beating them on the track. So.
And it's the best way to do it. Yeah, well, Lewis is certainly a character that prefers to do his talking on the track, and as we've seen in F1 history, he's very, very good at that. Let's move on to, obviously, some other talking points. As I said, guys, look, this isn't much of a race that we can talk about. We're aware of that. And, you know, there are some things that we can talk about on this, guys. So, you know, feel free to weigh in if there's other things that we miss out. The reason why I did want to bring up the actual race result itself, Stephen, is because there's still a lot of talk on social media as we speak over the legitimacy of the classification, because they only did 2 completed laps or 3 completed laps, if you like. And when the red flag comes out, usually you end up with a countback where they go with a result that was 2 laps old now, or 2 laps ago. Now, if they do that, that takes you back to lap 1 or 1 completed lap, which means that if they go by that result as the classified result instead of the one we have at the moment, that could mean that they failed to complete the minimum number of laps, of 2 laps, which means that they won't be able to award points. It's currently being talked about at the moment, and I'm wondering if this, because some of the press, I think Chris Medland, F1 journalist,
I think that's fair because they haven't gone out and done anything.
Well, no, this is it, yeah.
And before you say it, if Hamilton won the race, I'd still be saying the same thing.
No. Obviously, I know you're a Hamilton fan, but obviously, I'm not saying this for the benefit of this makes Hamilton's life easier in the championship. I mean, the point I'm making is that, technically speaking, obviously, if they were trying to do 2 completed laps just to get half points, by bringing out the red flag when they did, they may, on countback, not be able to claim that result from that lap, because traditionally speaking, when a race is stopped because of a red flag and doesn't continue, the result that they classify is 2 laps previous to avoid any strange last-minute situations or stuff like that, like we had in, I think it was Brazil back in 2003, I think it was, when Kimi Raikkonen passed Fisichella and the red flag come out, and the result on countback meant that Fisichella ended up winning the Grand Prix afterwards, but it wasn't until after the race, after the podium, that they didn't realise that. So obviously Fisichella didn't get to celebrate that win for the Jordan. I think it was the last time Jordan won a race in Formula One. But many years ago.
It had a fiery end as well.
It did, yeah. Most notably the crashes for Mark Webber in the Jag and Fernando Alonso in the Renault as well, if I remember right.
I was talking for Fisichella, that was...
Yes, yeah, of course, because that was the big sticking point. Obviously, that's why we had the red flags that followed afterwards, but it was so, you know, really strange stuff. So that's why I say it, because I don't want to tempt fate here, because obviously there's one particular reason why we can actually be very very happy about today's result, and I'm really worried that I'm going to get to that. I'm really worried that if this happens and the result becomes null and void, it will be such cruel fate. But we're gonna carry on as if the result does stand, and that's, of course, as you mentioned, Stephen, George Russell, P2, of course, by virtue of the incredible job he did in qualifying, missed the Saturday, has finally got an F1 podium, hopefully. I mean, as I said already, Stephen, in a way, it's not the way that he would have wanted to do it.
No.
He had that very near miss in Sakir when he should have won in the Mercedes if it wasn't for the issues that befalled him there. He's had near misses for points finishes for Williams last season. Of course, he managed to do that at the first time officially in the last race at Hungary. And today, of course, after an incredible qualifying performance, I mean, I don't think you'd want to take that trophy away from George, would you?
No, I wouldn't. But I feel for me, but I mean, if there is any reason the results should stand, it's for Russell, for sure. And I remember watching the qualifying, and when he went fast in the first set, I remember saying, "Nah, that's not possible. You can't do that. You can't do that." He went past the second set, and I'm like, then I'm starting cheering Hamilton and Russell at the same time. I'm like, hang on, I want Hamilton to win. Whoa. And yeah, the guy has done an incredible job. He's done an incredible job ever since he's been in a Williams. If that doesn't tell a total or if he should be in a Mercedes, then I don't know what will. Before anyone says it, no, there isn't any conspiracy that Hamilton doesn't want him in there because of competition or anything like that. It's just like they want to make sure they have the driver ready to fire on all cylinders, and I think he is. To be honest, he's out doing what Bottas can do in a Mercedes right now. The only thing that Bottas can do right now is either A, stop Max Verstappen winning races by winning races himself, right? Or support his teammate in the best way he can. And when he's 13th or 14th in the grid, right, okay, he had a penalty, but still, when he's still dropping 6th or 7th in the grid in the wet, and he's not up there with Verstappen and Hamilton, which to be fair, unlike Perez has done most of the season, he's going to get replaced. And as much as he hates that, and I do think it's going to be a direct swap. I think Bottas will go straight back to Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of got ahead of me on my next question, actually. But, I mean, just going back briefly to the controversy over to whether this race result was actually going to stand, I mean, it kind of just sums up how crazy a day this was. And the FIA and the stewards, they've come under a lot of controversy and a lot of scrutiny throughout the year for so many different reasons. It's not been easy for them, and I think there's a lot more transparency that we're seeing now owing to the broadcasting graphics on the radio between the teams and the FIA, which was never normally broadcasted to the general public, but now we're seeing this on a regular basis, especially on a day like today. And I think ultimately what we're seeing here is that there was a lot of difficult situations, and no matter how you look at it, it's very, very hard at the moment for the stewards and the FIA to come out of this looking good rather than looking like half the time they were making this up as they go along.
They don't look good in any situation from this because they didn't get Grand Prix started. Simple as that. I feel they just have to be transparent and say, yeah, okay, we made a mistake, we couldn't get this done, where it could have been done earlier in the day because the rain was less frequent back then. Maybe they should have known that there was a storm coming, they could have done it then, and obviously. But I feel that in this case is that he could have they could have been just, I think, just transparent in the way they just go, okay, all right, we haven't got this exactly right, but we're doing this. We've done these 2 laps, but we've got to stop the race because it's just not safe. And if we saw what happened to Norris in a Rouge in qualifying, which was a nasty impact, and imagine that at the start of the race because of aquaplaning, and we saw it in the EFW Championship as well this weekend. But if you imagine that, and then say if that's Max Verstappen, it's aquaplaned off the road as the leader, and then he's got 19 cars who've just made it through coming at him in the middle of the road, you get what happened in 2019. And that's the last thing we need.
Yeah, that's something I did put out on Twitter over the weekend after I saw that crash with Lando Norris. I I wasn't happy, like a lot of people weren't, owing to the risk that was being taken. It did seem very dangerous.
Fuming.
I think, and this is something I do want to actually raise. Since I'm glad you brought this up, because obviously we can talk about the changes that the circuit needs to make, and I think the circuit are already planning to make changes. I think this was something that they were going to sign off. They'd already signed off to do for 2022, where I think they were going to introduce gravel traps on the outside of Eau Rouge and Raidillon, move the barriers a bit further back and build a new stand. So quite a big project going on, but I think hopefully they reckon it's going to be ready for next season. So the works are already underway for that. Obviously, they just needed this race to be done, and then they're going to work on it. But one thing I did want to ask you, Stephen, is do you think that in situations like that, the drivers should be listened to a lot more than they actually are, or perhaps they need to be considered the reference point in terms of what the stewards do?
I mean, as much as you want the medical car and the formation car to go laps around the track, but that's a Mercedes W series, right? That's used to driving on the roads, so it's used to driving in monsoon conditions, right? F1 cars aren't designed to do it. The race, at what point as a road car you're literally on the floor, and if it fills up with water, you go skirting off the road. You don't, right? And you do 50 to like 80 mile an hour, probably 70 mile an hour tops on the roads, right? As the speed limit. Right? I won't say 80 just in case you get nicked. But yeah, so they need to be the reference point, and this is what. How many times we've had like drivers come on and say red flag it, and then an accident happens, and I'm like, what the hell, right? George Bianchi, right? Everyone was screaming on the radio, it's getting heavier, we need to stop the race, and then Sutil and then Bianchi goes off, and we all know what happened next. So yes, they need, as much as we've got the virtual safety car now. We've got also the safety car that can illegally come on in situations where it's dangerous. You need to have drivers in a race situation as the reference point. So if they come around on the radio saying, if you've got both the championship contenders, Max Verstappen, who's leading the race and needs to gain points on his rival, if he's coming out and saying it's too wet, which is what he was saying, then clearly that must tell you he needs to stop the race, because he needs to win the race. He needs the maximum points. He needs to close down the championship. But he's more worried about spinning off and having an accident, or anyone else having an accident, because he might have all the whip in his car. But if you look at Haas, they could just about stay on the road in the dry. Right? I mean, it's Mazepin, right?
Got the fastest lap today, didn't he?
Well, yeah, we won't say any more about that, shall we? And don't forget, we got the AlphaTauri of it. It's not Sonoda, it's Spinoda. So you've got to bear that in mind. They've got lesser cars with lesser downforce.
Yeah, I mean, it is a bit of a concern, because obviously when I was watching qualifying, we'd obviously seen already what had happened in the W Series. Thankfully, all the women involved were okay. Obviously, after
that was nasty.
A little bit, it wasn't. Yeah, I for those of you that haven't seen it, I wouldn't recommend watching it because it wasn't pleasant view. And all I can say is all the women involved were okay. Obviously, they had their checks and everything else, and they'll be back to race another day. Which is,
when I saw that, and also saw like the nicest accident, it's like I watched like the 2019 F2 race live. In 2019, I watched that F2 race live, and it was like a flashback to that, and I'm like, oh, for God's sake.
Well, this is it, yeah. And the saving grace was that Norris in qualifying, there was no one around him. I mean, Seb Vettel was the first person to get to him, and I think what's really frustrating as a fan, I can understand Vettel's frustration in what he said afterwards on the team radio. In reaction to hearing it, is that he literally called it about 15-20 seconds saying this is way too wet, someone's going to have a big accident, we need to stop this, and then literally as he's going down the hill to approach Eau Rouge and Raidillon, told on the radio, and it's almost like you could predict that. And fans watching at home, I was watching it thinking someone's going to have a big accident at the top of Raidillon or something. It could potentially be the first car there. Even Martin Brundle saw it just before it happened on the commentary, and you're just thinking, You know, the stewards and the people at the FIA, they're not idiots. You know, these are people that have a lot of racing
One
pedigree.
of them's got a race. One of them's got a racing former world champion or racing driver.
Well, no, this is it. Yeah, this is it. And I don't understand why people with such pedigree and experience are willing to take these risks when you've got access to all of the drivers on the team on their radios saying the same thing. Look, this is dangerous. We shouldn't be on the track. I mean, a lot of people that don't watch Formula One very often or don't understand Formula One to the degree that hardcore fans do, and with the greatest respect that I say this, will probably go on social media and say, oh, these men and women are meant to be the best drivers in the world. They should be able to handle this. You know, it's only a bit of water. The fact is that when the water falls on the track at a certain rate and there's a gap between the ground coverage and the tyres filled by water, you're basically aquaplaning. And what that means is that there's no contact between the tyre and the ground. It's covered by water. So effectively, you're on a boat. And it doesn't matter if you are Lewis Hamilton or if
it's
you're...
It's one of those, if you're trying to do in a boat around a corner. It doesn't work.
Exactly, yeah. It doesn't matter if you're Lewis Hamilton or some 17-year-old kid taking his first driving lesson. It literally, you're a passenger. And at those speeds, you can't afford to take risks because we've obviously seen firsthand in ideal racing conditions what can happen.
The problem is that in the end, it's they need the show to run to, like, for the TV coverage, the money they get for the TV deals. Because if they don't show a race, it's a disaster, right? Because the TV companies are paid to watch to have the rights for this race. So if they don't get it and get it shown, it's a disaster in terms of financials, right? In the end, money does talk. It does talk. As much as we love to say that the FIA have done a brilliant job of trying to get F1 as safe as it possibly can, and it is, and they do make responses in the end. In the end, they will take these risks in the end because you sort of get, when you see so many accidents and you see drivers step out like Norris and that, you sort of get sort of lazy in a sense, not completely on it and staying 100% aware. And at times when you do that is then when you have the biggest accidents happen out of nowhere. And I feel that's what, I mean, that's what happened with Jules Bianchi in the end. I think they got too lazy and trying to get this race done in that amount of time. That's what happened in the end. And it was about trying to get that race done and trying to get it run. So it was, in the end, they get lazy and think more about getting the race done for the financial side of it. Because in the end, that covers the prize money that these teams get as well. So in the end, like I said, money talks, and when you see the amount of accidents that people just walk away from, you get lazy and start thinking more about the financial side of the F1. And is it affordable to be able to take these risks and get away with it? Well, knowing how safe it is. They sometimes bank on the safety a little bit too much.
Perhaps. I mean, the straight answer to all of that is that safety at no point should be compromised for the benefit of a viewing audience or a broadcast, because...
But the problem is that then if we don't get a Grand Prix, we're all sitting there like, why the hell we ain't got a Grand Prix?
Well, I mean, the truth is that we had a race today, Stephen, that we didn't think was going to go ahead and probably shouldn't have gone ahead, and they should have perhaps made provisions for other things or perhaps cancelled the race altogether. And I think a lot of people, as you can see on social media following the race, are complaining about the fact that...
Do you think they could have rescheduled it?
I don't know if they could have rescheduled it, but I don't know. As I said, it's been very, very difficult this year owing to stuff with COVID, etc. The likelihood is they probably would have just cancelled it altogether, avoided it, which of course is a frustration to the fans that have turned up, and it is a bit of a pain for us watching. But the reality is that most F1 fans, or most motorsport fans, not just F1, other series as well that we saw on the F1 paddock. There was an F3 crash as well, similar fashion, this weekend. Fortunately, again, everyone was okay. But what you end up putting yourself in a position is that I think you have to accept that F1 fans or motorsport fans in general will accept that, yes, it's disappointing. I mean, what we got today a lot of the F1 fans was having fun on social media. I mean, I was using the DNF1 page and tweeting stuff out and having a laugh and having a joke and engaging with so many different people. And you know what? That was a fun way to pass the time. But we're all doing that sitting there knowing that there's likely not going to be any racing at all, or we're going to end up with what we ended up with, and that was like 2 laps just for the sake of awarding points. Now we're in a situation where that may be overturned completely because of a mistake that the stewards have made with their own rule book. So, you know, I just think when it comes to safety, and you've mentioned this a lot of times on your own show, when I've been on there, you've always been the first person to talk about safety being paramount, and I completely agree. And I think we need to have this discussion, not us personally, but I think F1 needs to have this discussion with anyone who's influencing decisions in terms of broadcasting or TV, if they're trying to get drivers to drive not necessarily against their will, but perhaps taking more risks than are necessary, in that, you know, there is a discussion that needs to take place.
Do you feel the drivers should have more power to say that if they don't feel that they feel that the conditions are safe after doing a formation lap, they could just get out of the car?
I don't know about that so much, because it's quite complex in terms of legal stuff, etc., etc. Look, like I said, I don't think drivers should be forced to drive against their will when there's an element of danger like that. And we've seen sometimes drivers pull out of races or do stuff. I mean, what happened in Bahrain last year? Yeah, Lauda, of course, in Japan in 76. We saw, of course, last season at Bahrain after Grosjean's crash, there were a lot of drivers that didn't want to carry on, but united as they were, they decided, no, we're going to do a race and we'll be fine. These F1 drivers and the W Series drivers and Formula 3 drivers, all of them are incredibly brave young men and women who will, if people are going to go out and race, regardless of the conditions, they will most likely follow suit. And that's what we saw in qualifying yesterday.
This is the thing, that when it comes to racing, if it's like when you say, if you've got 2 cars here, right, one's 2 seconds slow than the other, but that one's completely safe, right? The other one is 2 seconds fast. It's very fast, but you probably get killed in it if you crash it. They'll all jump in the fast one.
Well,
because they all jump. They all want to go. They all want to be the quickest. They all want to win.
But no.
So it's kind of like, that's why in the end they was taken out of their hands, and FIA. Yeah, it was thrown responsibility to the FIA, because literally the FIA used to just go, well, if you think it's dangerous, well, don't drive then. And and we'll get someone else. And now it's like they've thrown it to the FIA, so like it's down the FIA's responsibility to make the sport safe, which is what they've done. But then again, the drivers should have a firm say in saying, if this is too dangerous for us, we just should not race. End of.
I think they should be listened to in terms of being able to live report to them the state of the conditions so that they can make their own judgment calls based on that. I don't know if I agree with the F1 drivers having to make a decision all the time for them. I do think the FIA, it's their responsibility to ensure that racing is safe for everyone involved. The reality is, Stephen, what we saw yesterday was that there were drivers that went out, even though everyone expressed their concerns about the safety. There were drivers that went out because the FIA said, no, you can carry on, it's fine, we're not red flagging it yet. So they'll go out and do a set time. But they kind of knew that something was going to happen to someone, or someone was going to make a mistake and have an incident and that bring out the red flag. And of course, as we saw, the first person up Oyu Rouge and Radion had an accident, and then that brought out the red flag. So, I mean, for me, as I was saying earlier, I think a discussion needs to be had between F1 and those that obviously make these decisions, etc., whoever it is that's influencing stuff. And just the F1 community in general needs to have this open discussion, not people on their platforms that have bigger platforms than others trying to not necessarily demonize, but make people that have contrasting opinions to them on this matter look stupid. I don't think that's fair, and I don't think that's right at all. You know, we all want F1 to be safe, but at the same time, as safe as it can be. But we all have to accept that there is always going to be an element of risk associated with Formula One. What is key, whilst that is also a legitimate argument, it must be said, what is key though, is that we need to establish that it is possible to make F1 as safe as it possibly can be, and not force the drivers to put themselves into a position where they're taking unnecessary risks. What we saw with Lando Norris yesterday was an unnecessary risk. Of course, the W Series and the F3 crash was a bit dangerous and risky, but
of course,
that was stuff that could be controlled.
the W series was like the rain started coming down at that point and that particular part of the circuit. And you can't help that spot. One part can be bone dry, one part can be completely soaked. So you can't help that in a sense. And it's like you just said, it's I feel that the drivers that know themselves that like when they sign up to become an F1 driver, right? It's like when you sign up to call I hate to use the term, it's like sometimes it's like when you sign up to join the army, you know, sometimes that you are going to get, if it goes wrong, you could get gravely injured or killed because motorsport is a dangerous sport. And in the end, it's always the freak accidents, like a Grosjean accident, or Antoine Hubert's or George Yankees that can end up killing someone. And so as much as we need to like accept that that is part of the sport and it's always going to be there, in that case, we must make sure we're not doing anything that is, like you said, unnecessary and that could put us in that situation.
Yeah, it's an interesting comparison. I for one certainly.
I'm not, man. I mean,
I'm just saying
that comparison. It's just like I couldn't think of anything else to sort of.
I know what you mean. There's obviously
or maybe
a risk.
like a boxing fight, like you know you're gonna get injured if you sign up to be a boxer or something.
Oh, unless
like,
you're Floyd Mayweather, yeah. But no, I know what you mean. Obviously, there is a risk involved. It's something like signing up for the armed forces. Of course, it would be nice for them to get paid anywhere near as much as what Formula One drivers do.
Oh yeah, no man. I'm just paid a lot more than that.
Yeah, I'm just saying. But no, you're right though, because there is definitely a risk involved. As I said, look, I bring this up because I'm not trying to target anyone in particular, people on bigger platforms. But one thing I have seen is, whilst I agree with their opinion on the matter of safety and that F1 needs to be made as safe as we possibly can make it, whilst accepting there is always going to be a risk attached with it because it's a dangerous sport, I don't think that some people should be seeing people that have the alternate opinion, which is, well, F1 is risky anyway. We can't make it too safe. There's always stuff like that. To demonize these people as if they're idiots, because that's not the right approach. You're never going to achieve anything by doing stuff like that or trying to score points by saying, oh, they're an idiot, look at them, let's all laugh at them. Like, I think we have to accept there's always going to be a risk associated with motorsport. Always has been, always will be. But certain incidents like what we saw with the W series, of course, we can mitigate that by making the changes that apparently they're proposing to make in Spa, which is a good thing. And hopefully we'll see those very soon and those will deliver the desired results. But
I was just
going to finish. But the situation that we saw in qualifying with Lando Norris, that it being way too wet, clearly pointed out by so many drivers, and Lando being Lando, like the other drivers would have done behind him, they took that risk because these guys have got balls of steel. They're just ridiculously brave, and perhaps a little bit stupid. Probably you have to be a Formula One driver of that talent. For that to happen and take that unnecessary risk, as I said, we've seen what can possibly happen when it goes horribly wrong. And there are certain factors with Lando's incident that was lucky in the fact that, one, it was qualifying. Two, there was no one absolutely near him. Three, safety is improving all the time and these F1 cars are handling things better than they have done. Those alone should not be enough to justify taking those unnecessary risks. So for me, I just feel like discussions need to be made and say, look, guys, I think we really need to be more proactive. Listen to the drivers, get their input, because these guys have got the best reference point. They're the ones feeding us this information. And if we're not acting on that and something happens, then you start having serious problems. Fortunately, Lando was okay, other than a bit of a bruised ego and everything else, and he was ready to get in the car today. But maybe the next person's not so lucky. So I think, they have to make these decisions and start doing them sooner rather than taking unnecessary risks.
Do you think Spa's Rouge and Radio needs to change itself, the corner itself?
That's a good question, and I think this was another one that was brought up as a topic of debate. I love that corner complex, and I think when you talk about Spa, you have to talk about Rouge and Radion. Personally, I don't think you need to change the corner to achieve the results we want in terms of making it safer. But stuff like introducing a gravel trap on the outside so drivers don't try to get greedy on track limits, which tends to cause more accidents than not. Moving the barrier back, make them safer.
I think with Norris's accident, it was the bumps in the middle of the corner that unsettled the car. Now, to be honest, why are those bumps? Knowing how dangerous Rouge can be, why the hell are you having bumps in the middle of the corner? I would have probably made sure that was completely smoothed out to eliminate any sort of risks of that. That would have been probably my first, is relay the surface of that to make sure that it's smooth as it can be, rather than having bumps that could unsettle the car like it did. And I mean, now obviously it's easy flat in most F1 cars now, even with full fuel. So it's So for me, I think in terms of the actual surface itself, I think it needs to be smoothed out to eliminate any risks of the cars being unsettled because of unnecessary bumps being caught wrong.
I know what you mean. I agree with that to some level. I think there are stuff that you can do. I think what's important, I think that a lot of people have mentioned when they've brought this up, is that you don't necessarily need to change the corner. It's a dangerous corner. It's very thrilling if anyone's ever been up it and, walked up it, let alone drive it. And it's sight to see for F1 cars to go up there at top speed. It really is. But I don't think you necessarily have to change the corner to make it a lot safer. I think what the proposed changes are, so with the gravel, moving the barriers back, etc., etc. Jack Aitken pointed this out, and he was involved in that crash a couple of years ago in F2, that if you move the barrier back a lot further and increase the runoff area, you will make it a lot safer. I'm hoping that they introduce that soon and that actually had the desired effect rather than what we've seen in the past, because it does feel like we're really much dancing with danger on this one, and I feel like something has to change. And as I said, I don't think you need to change the corner to achieve that. So we'll have to wait and see what they do on that one. But before we wrap this up, Stephen, just one last thing I did want to ask about. Obviously, now that we've had this Grand Prix, we're still going to have to wait and see what happens in the coming days over the result, whether it's actually going to stand or not, because it seems by the looks of it, this one is certainly not over. But move that aside, let's assume that it stays as it is.
Over, how they got started.
Well, this is it, yeah. 3 points now between Max Verstappen and Lewis Hamilton going into the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort. Obviously, we expected Belgium to be a bit of an equaliser for Mercedes in this regard, perhaps a track where they might be able to get a result. How do you see that going down at Zandvoort? Are you expecting a very, well, not hostile, but a very much a partisan crowd for Max to really fire him up?
I think it's definitely a bit of a hostile crowd now.
Well, if you're Lewis Hamilton, it might be, because a lot of Dutch fans, I'm hoping they'll be nicer. If they're in a much bigger bunch, there might be less of the ones that boo him, but
I think if what would like you said earlier before with Max Verstappen, I think it'd be nice to see is if they do go there, if Max Verstappen just if he does hear anything, just comes out and said no, leave it, like, we're rivals, with he deserves respect, and that should just deter it. Obviously, it's the Grand Prix that you can tell the FIA have been bursting to get this race on the scene since Max Verstappen's arrival in F1, and obviously because the first race that didn't happen, but he was supposed to have about 1 million tickets sold, so of course you'd want to get that race done. So yeah, it'd be interesting. Whether there'll be rain, I don't know. I've never seen Zandvoort. I've never seen it actually for myself live, so I don't know what the weather could be like. But it's nice that we're going back to an old circuit, and I like the look of the track. I've driven it on the game itself. It's not like real life, but it's as close as you can get. But it's not easy. It's It's quite thrilling. Some of the corners, half of it, some very fast sweeping corners, and quite in tough braking zones in that as well. So it's a circuit I could see Hamilton doing well at. But he does so well in some of these circuits, let's be honest.
Yeah, there's not many places he hasn't done well at. I mean, I was going to sort of go in and ask you, I mean, obviously, despite what happened at Hungary and Silverstone, overall the momentum is, Red Bull obviously will be feeling good. I mean, today was a bit of a moot point anyway. If anything, Max, by virtue of his qualifying performance, has managed to get himself 5 points without having to do much after that. So I suppose there is some credibility in the result for him. But obviously going into that race, as I said, partisan crowd very much going to be in favour of Max Verstappen and Red Bull in particular. Mercedes are going to be very much up against it this next weekend. But how confident are you feeling about Lewis Hamilton? Do you think that he can, as he's often done in the past, remember Monza 2018 when he turned the Tifosi on their head with the performance he put in there, can he put together a similar performance as Zandvoort?
I have always faith in Lewis to do so, as much as when I remember that 2018 race, Ferrari were so much, I think they had about 3, 4, maybe 5 tenths on the Mercedes, even in a straight line as well. So I was like, no, this championship could be slipping. But he turned that on his head with just relentless drive, and it's not going to be easy to overtake there. There's about one opportunity, I'd say, to overtake, especially in these cars.
So turn one, wouldn't it?
Yeah, it'd be turn one. And so for me, if he gets pole, then it's open for him. It also then depends like how the strategy goes, because like I do feel it's a circuit they can gain a lot on the undercut. So with a fresher tyre around the twisty circuit, around the twisty part of the circuit. So yeah, it's going to be a very strategic race rather than just the one where they can pass. But I do feel that if anyone could pull out a qualifying performance that could put him on the pole for the Grand Prix and put him in pole position, and make him favourite to win the race, then it is Lewis Hamilton.
Yeah, no, that's a fair point. I mean, it's going to be really exciting. I'm really looking forward to qualifying. I think that's where we're going to see the most excitement. But of course, who knows, what could happen in the race. Hopefully, we get a race next week, and we can try and banish this one to the memory banks. Lord only knows what Drive to Survive are going to make of this race. They were following Mercedes around. Probably that fella that was in the go-kart earlier, a fella in the go-kart that was beached it yesterday in qualifying. We'd probably say he won the race after everything that's been going on. But I just want to say to everyone, obviously, today was a very, very strange day. That obviously, stuff that I was doing on Twitter and social media for the DNF1 page, all of you that interacted and engaged with that, really, really appreciate that, because I think we don't often talk about how great the F1 community can be sometimes. And I think on a day like today, when we basically sat for 3 hours with nothing to do but entertain ourselves, we all kind of bounded together on social media to make fun, put memes up, talk about F1, chat with each other and engage with each other. And it just shows...
I'd love to know like that. I mean, I think it'd be nice to try and sort of... I mean, obviously, with what I'm trying to do on my channel as well, is that trying to get engaged with that community as well is something I've been desperately trying to crack. So hopefully, like for the next Grand Prix, we try and see if we can do that during a watch along at some point. Because obviously, once you're in the watch along, it's hard not to take your eyes away from the action. But it'd be nice to try and get on that community on social media, because it's something that I feel that we could I really want to break into, because it's I do see I saw some of the tweets that they were putting out, and it was quite fun, to be honest, with 3 hours to go. It was just, I think me and like my co-host were just doing quizzes at the end of it, so weren't many people watching, let's put it that way, but it was something to pass the time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, you're right. Sorry, I'm just looking on social media. I'm just seeing that they've put a provisional race result again, like the final classification. It looks like they're awarding points, but it's going to be based off a 1-lap race. So it's basically as we were, just it's an absolute mess at this point, to be honest. I mean, what happens if a team protests it? I mean, can you imagine Mercedes protesting the result? The points being awarded, because obviously to help their cause and Hamilton's cause, but at the result of ruining George Russell's first podium, I mean, that would be controversial. But Imagine that. But the point where they offer him the seat, if they do offer him the seat, and he says no, although
all I could say is Christian Horner would do exactly the same thing. So
well, I
that's
mean,
all I'm
Christian
gonna
would,
say.
but would he do it? I mean, it's probably a different situation with AlphaTauri compared to Georgia. It's, as I said, very, very strange circumstances we've seen today. I mean, we've kind of seen it all almost, except for an actual F1 race, pretty much. But,
Yeah, we've seen everything possible without an actual race.
yeah, it's
We've seen a
amazing.
crash. We've seen safety cars. We've seen formation laps. We've seen pit stops.
Seb and Mick playing football together in the Haas garage. We saw Alpine mechanics dancing with each other. We saw Daniel Ricciardo getting everyone to do a Mexican wave in the grandstands. We saw Marshalls playing, I don't know what they were playing. They were throwing balls into a gravel trap. What a game that was. Yeah, we pretty much... Oh, is that what it's called? Oh, right. Fair enough. It was a bit weird when I saw it. I was like, I don't know what they're doing. Like, who can throw the furthest?
Is it like, silver medal?
Yeah. I mean, it looked like it was like, who can throw the furthest? And I thought, that's rubbish. I could throw further than that. Like, but apparently that's not what they were doing.
What it is, it's like bowls.
Yeah.
Instead of bowling it, you...
Oh, right. I'm with you now. Right,
French petanque.
Fair enough. I mean, it looked like they were having a good time. But yeah, as I said, everyone is sort of banding together to keep us all entertained. It was really, really fun. It just shows how great the F1 community can be sometimes. So for everyone that was involved with us, really appreciate that. But look, Stephen, we're going to wrap this up now because, of course, we've pretty much talked people's ears off about a race that never really happened. But before we do go, where can our followers find you on social media and your channel?
You can find me on obviously SFeatleyTV, where we do F1, Arsenal, unfortunately, football content as well, because that keeps me sane for the football at least. So we do all of that as well as F1, and obviously we do previews for the Grand Prix. We do a weekend review. Unfortunately, won't be one for this one because I just didn't see the need for the point for it. There was not much to talk about other than what we talked about. So, a lot of the viewers that I have really want to understand what we were talking about today. So, like I said, we do previews, we do reviews, we do race watch-alongs, qualifying watch-alongs. And it's all in name for Children's Liver Disease Foundation, which all the money we make from now we're a monetized channel is that money goes towards Children's Liver Disease Foundation or from what we make. So just by viewing us, it does help raise money. You could join a membership from as little as $1.99, where we've got amazing perks to go with that. And just it's hopefully trying to build a nice F1 community along with that, because we're only about 7 away from 1.1k now. So
yeah, doing really, really well.
I know, just trying to. I'm trying to break that 1.1 barrier for a while, so I'm trying to break it. So
yeah, no, that sounds fantastic, and of course, as you said, Stephen, for a very, very worthy cause. Of course, you yourself very, very much hold close to your heart as well. And so, guys, of course, as I said already, if you're interested, go check Stephen's channel out, I should say, and make sure to subscribe to his channel and really help him out. It's a really worthy cause and some good stuff on there as well. As always, guys, it's been a very, very strange day for us F1 fans. Not much of a race to talk about, but I like to think that we've made a good go at having some stuff that we could have talked about based on today and some other stuff as well relating to what we've seen. But of course, if you have enjoyed it, make sure to give the video a like and consider subscribing, I should say. God, I'm twisting my words. Consider subscribing, I should say, to the DNF1 channel on YouTube. And of course, if you are following us on your favorite podcasting platforms, please do make sure to give us a follow and give us a good review if you have the option to do so. We would really appreciate it. But until next time, guys, we are going to be returning for the Dutch Grand Prix preview. But until next time, as I said already, stay safe. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you in the next episode of the DNF1 F1 podcast. Take care.